Happy Thursday, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Brett Allan Show, a pop culture podcast where we interview your favorite celebrities from film, television, comedians, and a lot of other places that pop culture exists. And today's episode will certainly not disappointment, or will not disappoint. Say that 10 times fast. We have a huge star with us today, Mickie James. She is a six-time WWE champion. She's a musician. She's a mom. She's a fashion person. She likes to design things, all these other things. We're talking about this before we started taping. Mickie, welcome into the podcast. It's good to have you here today.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, Brett. I think that I'm a designer. I just watch a lot of HGTV, and I think I know what I'm talking about. So I feel like I could fully rehab a home if I needed to, if I had, the tools.
Yeah. Well, it's a lot of work, but the space that I'm in, and we were talking about this earlier, she designed this pretty much from scratch. It was like a tough shed, basically, that stored tools and furniture and other things. And then she converted it into a space to live. So there's a loft and there's a television. And she's kind of the same like you, she likes to design things and fashion them. So, well, now, excuse me, you have lots of time on your hands. I know you're traveling with music and things like that. How have you been? What's been going on with you? I've been following you on social media. I know you've been traveling a lot with your music and spending time with your husband and your family. Let's talk about that and just how has life been for you over the last couple of months?
Actually, really, really amazing these last couple of months. I've had a chance to sit back. You'd think that I would have slowed down, but I have not. I've been busier and busier than ever because I've just put more stuff on my plate. Like, obviously, coming out of the pandemic, I'm so excited to be able to get to perform in front of live audiences again, both on stage and in the ring. I just had my first music concert back in like 2 years over the past weekend. And I drove out to Virginia so I could see my family and do all that. And then drove the 10 hours back because we had a press conference in St. Louis just a couple days ago, and which went fantastic. Went so well, and then just got back home. So I'm like, I can decompress for a second and just sit back. But I have so much to do, especially like heading up the Empower pay-per-view and everything. There's just a lot of things to do, and it's a lot of responsibility. So I've been working hard, keeping all kinds of crazy hours, which is good because I always keep crazy hours anyway, so.
Yeah, well, I imagine during your time with the WWE and TNA and all of that, I imagine that has to be the most insane schedule that anybody could possibly keep. Like, you have musicians and people that travel all the time, but that schedule has to be just absolutely nuts. So it must be nice to be able to do other things that obviously you enjoy as well, but that are a little bit different instead of just going from town to town to town, waking up in a different city every day or every other day. Yeah. And then just kind of rinse, wash, and repeat, I guess, would be the best way.
But there is a certain kind of energy about that because that's one of the things that I loved about being on the road was being able to go through so many different cities and even small towns. Like, I'm such a little history buff, architecture buff. Like, I just love old buildings and all these things with stories behind them. And I really cherish the time on the road of being able to do that and stop into these towns and kind of get a feel for the landscape and the people there. Obviously it was a lot easier to do that before I became a mom, because I want to be home or be able to take my son with me on these adventures now. So that's a little bit different. And I think, touring with music is very similar to touring, especially at the stage I'm at. It's not like I have a private bus and that's just carting me around we all love to get to that level, but that is
all
really
of us would.
Yeah. Right. Everybody would. Like, everybody goes, oh, you want a private plane? I'm like, actually, I would prefer a bus because I do love, there's something about the open. And I think because I grew up on the road trying to make it in wrestling so long of I enjoyed those times in the car of traveling or being by myself or with whoever I was traveling and having those conversations and those memories and those stories from the road. But I think ideally I would much prefer a bus over a private jet, unless we had to cross water, because then obviously the,
Yes.
the bus is not going to get across the water. But
Yeah,
unless it
it's
was a
interesting.
magic bus, which then
Yes,
I'm
I
in.
know. Well, I mean, there is the Magic School Bus, so but those don't exist for folks. uh,
Unfortunately.
unfortunately, no. I love it. So obviously, being a mom, being a wife is very important to you, and that has always been one thing that, well, many things. I mean, I've been a fan since day one, really, but really just watching your life change over the years, becoming a mom and that sort of thing. Does your son, I mean, he's older now, clearly, but does he kind of look at your life that you lived before? Does he
I
understand kind of what you did?
I don't think he has any idea of what it is so normal for him. So this is the difference. I think like I go like, God, I don't think he truly realizes what it is or what, you know what I mean? And
Sure.
like even in like the conversations, like he just thinks it's normal because this is what mom does, this is what dad does, these are their friends, and it's just his normal, which is kind of so I don't think he doesn't even sell it. Like he doesn't care.
Really? He's
He
just
doesn't
like,
even care. Like, I mean, he enjoys going to the shows and doing the stuff, and he loves to get inside the ring and run and play in the ring
of
and stuff
course.
like that. But when it comes to actually understanding what we do or watching the television product as a whole, like he'll watch it and be like, oh, yeah, that's cool. But I think he would much rather be watching Blaze and the Monster Machines. And
Yes.
so it's like not impressed. Not impressed. No, but it's pretty weird. I know, I guess because it's like it's hard to say that because you think like it'd be like, oh, he's also very young. He's 6, he's going on 7. And so I think he's just growing. He just got into cars, like actual like Hot Wheels and Matchbox cars and that kind of stuff, because prior to that it was all trains, and then Legos are obviously massive, but it was, it's just all these phases that kids go through.
Sure.
But yeah, wrestling is not one of those things of like, I think because he's been backstage and seen it since he was an infant, it's nothing new to him. He's just kind of like, oh yeah, we're going to go to this thing. But
I find that extremely fascinating. My son just turned 7 this past weekend, so I get it. Like there's that comprehension of they kind of know what you do, but really it's like of no interest other than, my son's the same. He'd rather be playing Minecraft or some video game or Legos or something. Yeah, I mean, I imagine growing up around that, maybe when he's older, perhaps it'll sink in a little bit because they'll see the storylines and all of the
right.
drama and theatrics, so to speak, that go along with what you've done in the past. It's just very fascinating. So you've got the music, you're spending time with your son, you have all these other projects that you've got going on in your life. How do you find time to manage everything? Because I mean, you keep a very busy life.
I do. And I luckily have a good team around me, and obviously my husband and my family. Like it really does help, but it still has me like I'm going all the time. I have, obviously emails sitting there and things that I feel like I'm constantly catching up, to be honest, to stay on top of everything, because I do
Sure.
want to prioritize certain things and make sure I make time for my family first. So it's a lot, and it's just a big juggle, and it's like working those extra hours after my son goes to bed, and that's when I can get most of my real work done, like as far as on the computer or anything like that. And I'm not the most technology savvy person in the world as it is, so it takes a little extra time for me. But yeah, no, it's like honestly, I have a great team. My PR team is incredible, and my home team is incredible, and we have to work together to make it, because everybody's trying to juggle. Like we're all in the same boat, just juggling so much. So
Yeah, I find it extremely fascinating what you do and have done in the past as far as wrestling. I think it's just a big piece of Americana that has been around for decades. And over the years, it has changed significantly. Please correct me if I'm wrong. You got your start pretty much like in the mid to late 90s, is when you came onto the scene. Did music happen or exist before that, and it just happened to have a larger platform for you because of the wrestling, or did it come after the fact?
writing always had a big part
Okay.
for me. I always was a writer. Even in high school I took creative writing and novel, Music was always something that I truly wanted to do. I obviously played the violin for 5 years from middle school through about 10th grade. I think I stopped playing in 11th, my last 2 years. And I wish I wish I'd never stopped playing. I still have my violins. I just wish, you know what it was, is like you get going through that phase. And this is always my thing with people who are growing up, is like, don't listen to this mold or like what other people say, because it was one of those things, oh, you're nerdy because you play in the symphony and the whole thing. And I was trying to fit in and be cooler, so I dropped the violin, and now here I am, and I write music, and I wish I still played every day. I wish I still played, but it's still my favorite instrument. It's still my favorite instrument to hear and to listen to play. And yeah, I think that I kind of went off on a tangent there, but I think that all those things are, I wanted to sing, but it wasn't anything that I did chorus, or I would do like little theater classes or stuff, and voluntarily, but I just didn't think I was that great at it, but it was the ability to make it in wrestling and to get to that goal, and that, because I felt like that was so unobtainable for me. And it was something that I really, really wanted, and I was passionate about, as equally passionate about music as I was, and my horses as I was wrestling. But I really put all my eggs in the wrestling basket, in hopes to make it. And there was a lot of tests and a lot of things along the way. And I think that the fact that I was able to achieve that goal gave me the confidence to go after the other one. You know what I mean? It gave me my confidence to then go like, you know what? I've always wanted to do the music, and I've always thought that it would never happen for me. But I also thought that wrestling would never happen for me. The little girl from Montpelier would never make it. And everybody told me that, there's a lot of people who said I wouldn't make it. And so I just, even if this album, I'm just going to go to Nashville with this collection of songs that I've written on the road and prior in my, 10,000 notebooks I got strung around. I'm just going to take what I think are the best ones and take them to Nashville and just cut an EP of 1 or 2 songs. And if it doesn't do anything or it doesn't go anywhere, at least I did it. Yeah. And that was it. It was really like, I have to prove myself wrong, because I told myself that this wasn't possible for me. So I'm telling myself now that this is possible for me, and I'm going to do it and see what happens. And out of that, that's how, that started in 2008, I think, was when I first went to Nashville to start working on this album, the first album, of like making connections and talking to people. And I met my first producer. And out of that is how I've gotten here, 2 albums, 10 singles later, my own record label that I'm putting my music out on, like all these things, becoming a stronger songwriter, collaborations with like Yin Yang Twins and this new Chapel Heart band that, with our last single, like they're CMT's Next Women of Country. They are women to watch. And like, it was such a powerful song. And I was so honored to be able to do that with them and write that with them. And I just think I've grown so much as an artist, but I've grown so much confidence that I lacked, because I think it's 2 different people. Mickie James in the ring is a very different person than Mickie James on stage,
Oh, sure. You're not doing call outs during country music concerts.
Yeah. And it's just Mickie James in the ring was untouchable. She was unbreakable. She's superhero. She's like, whereas Mickie James on stage, songs and these songs that I'm writing and telling are from a very vulnerable space. And it's very much like the real Mickie James, or the other side of Mickie James that you don't get to see on here, because I have to be so strong, because it is such a masculine space, so I have to have thick skin, and I have to do all these things, but I don't necessarily have to be that tough on the stage by myself, so I can let you in a little bit more. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that even your fans on the wrestling side find that probably very appealing, because they get to see a different side of you. I want to turn the clock back to that time when you first got this idea that you wanted to be a wrestler and you wanted to make it all the way. I mean, how does that conversation even happen with yourself, with family? Because it's such an audacious sport. For one, it's like, it's different than anything that exists, I feel, than baseball, football, but it's also probably, from what I can see, one of the most competitive and a very masculine space, like you mentioned. Like, going in the 70s and the 80s. You know, you've got the Holgans and the Flairs and all these people, and then you start to see other people come onto the scene. Like, what was the genesis of you becoming a wrestler? Obviously, you just shared kind of your goal to make it as far as you did. 6-time champions, that's like almost unheard of in some spaces. How did you get to where you are? Like, what was kind of the idea from the beginning?
It's mindset, really. Mindset. I think when it comes down to it, like, obviously I never stopped working. Even when I was the best at the time on the scene, or perceived to be one of the best, I still was doing dojos and camps and a sponge, and I still am. I feel like I'm still learning to this day. You know, it's a constant learning curves. I will say, you know, obviously my love for wrestling started when I was young as a fan, you know, and it was a real true bonding experience. So that probably sparked that genuine love for the business. Plus it was the thing of like, this was the thing that my sisters and my dad all, when we would see each other on the weekends or every other weekend, this was our bonding thing. And, I was always a tomboy, and I was always a little bit tough. I grew up on a farm, and I trained horses and competed and showed horses. And, you know, my grandmother was very tough, and she's, you know, if you fall off, you have to get right back on. And these things it was already taught in me to be a fighter, and I'm already naturally very competitive, but also I demand a lot out of myself, and perfectionist. I'm very much a perfectionist in myself, a lot, and like hold myself to a high standard. But it wasn't until, you know, I fell off of the wrestling wagon for a while until the Attitude Era.
Right.
And it really started to, because, you know, we grow up and we evolve, and, you know, everybody's kind of doing their lives. And like I said before, it's like you grow up and you're getting that space, and you're like, oh, I want to be cool, or I like boys now. And I was so into my horses and competing. I was very competitive with my sister and I both. Like, we competed every summer, and big shows, you know, against real, you know, professional trainers and stuff, and did very, very well at it. And that's honestly where I saw my life going, because I still have this massive love and passion for horses, because there's the healing that they do, and just in my own personal life. But I found myself being enthralled and captured by wrestling all over again, and it was becoming hot again, and it was cool, and it was different. And I just fell back in love all over again because it was the characters and the stories and the losing yourself in those moments and that escapism and all these things. And I remember finally when I had the opportunity to go into a wrestling school, I'm like, this is it. This is what I want to do. And this is what I want to do. And I remember immediately making my goals of like, well, you know, because people go, oh, what do you want to do? Where do you see yourself? I'm like, I'm going to be the champion. I want to be the champion. I think you have to see yourself and believe yourself to be capable. Like, you have to believe it for yourself in order to achieve it. You have to believe that that's a possibility, and also see and visualize, and your mindset is everything, because I think that anyone can talk themselves in or out of anything that they want to, you know?
Sure.
And, you know, I think that if you lead with your heart and not let your mind talk yourself out of it, you can do powerful, powerful things, you know? So, and obviously that, you know, that journey was not the easiest of journeys, but I always envisioned myself, and I would constantly visualize myself there. Like, and when that finally happened, it was just like, it was breathtaking. It was overwhelming. The feeling that I just can't, you know, if I could tap into that space of like, that was that moment of achievement, of true, like, I made it, you know, when I found that first time. And so, yeah, it's mindset, and people go like, oh, it's luck. And it is that, like, there is a lot of right place, right time, right person believes in you. There is all of that. But I sent in probably I would send Dr. Tom a tape almost every 2 weeks, at least once a month, for probably 3 years straight, before I finally got the one where they called me and said, we're very interested. We want to sign you.
Wow.
So that's like all that interesting, but not yet of all those things. And I just never would accept it. I would be like, I'm going to prove it to them. I'm going to show them. I'm going to show them. I'm going to show it. Like, I just kept that, like in my mind. And it was a struggle sometimes, you know, because we're constantly tested and everything. But, you know, I think that it's always the biggest test before the biggest breaks. So.
Yeah. Wow. That's great. That's liquid gold there. I think because, yeah, there is the luck and the skill, but also you have the mindset from the beginning that this is what I want to do. And I think that's the problem that people face is they have these ideas of things they want to do and places they want to get, but they don't take the time to really map it out and decide mentally. Yeah, that's half the battle right there, you know, because, you know, yeah, you've won the championships and the belts and that sort of thing, but that's all, it's huge. Like, I mean, there's very few people who have maybe won 1 or 2, 6, 10, like Ric Flair or somebody like that. But like, that's a byproduct of all of the hard work that you've put into this. And of course, you get the byproduct of the celebrity and the young women or men who look at you and go, man, I want to do the same thing that she's doing when I grow up, because it's so fascinating. I'm 47. I've been watching wrestling for years, but I didn't even get to go to my first live event until like 2 years ago in Sacramento. And it is like an experience. Like it's crazy. And I had a friend, it's like, you got to sit here. You got to be in this place. I'm like, okay. To really get the full experience of the showmanship and everything.
Right.
I just find it so intriguing because you set your mind to it. It's great. I love it. And then you made it. And now you're entering this other part of your life too. But it was not without a lot of hard work and like,
absolutely. And I'll say
stress and anxiety, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, it's always, that is the one thing that people forget. You have to put in the work.
Yeah.
And I don't think that people, when someone says that, oh, it's like, oh, I'm working, I am working. I don't think people truly understand the work when I say you have to put in the work and the reps and the constant. It just does not, the grind does not stop. And even now the grind does not stop. You know, I think the hardest lesson for me to learn along that journey is to stop trying to control it and plan it. Like, cause everything, sometimes, like, you know, when I say like some of these things that have happened along the way, and I just go like, oh, it feels like such a big stoppage, or it stops you in your tracks, but it's always, you know, it is for a reason. And never, like, not everything is going to go along this perfect plan that you've mapped out for yourself. It doesn't necessarily happen to that way. And if you completely stay focused on that plan, then you block these other things that could potentially be the things that are your breakout. You know what I mean? And it took me a long time to go like, okay, quit trying to control it or like design exactly how it's supposed to happen, and just bust your ass and you work hard and do it the right way. And it is going to happen. It is inevitable, right? Like, so I stopped trying to say like, this is the way it's supposed to be and this is the way it's supposed to happen, because for everyone's different in every way. Their journey is different. Their story is different, and how they get there is different. And I really, now sitting back and my journey alone, like, God, I loved every moment of it. Even the good, the bad, the ugly, the highs, the lows. I have so many genuine, like, friends that I've made along the way in all of those pockets. And I have so many amazing memories that I just, you know what I mean? So those things are priceless. That's just what life is. Like, life is really, it's not about the destination. It's about the journey that it takes to get there. And that's really who defines what you are, you know, all along the way. And that's in and out of wrestling. That's just life in general. And I think sometimes it's just meant to be lived, and we forget that. Like, live it and enjoy it, you know?
Yeah. I mean, to go from one organization to another, then back to another, and to be able to cover all of those things. One last question. I know you've had a very busy day with press, but
I have, but I'm
you're a rock star.
Thank you.
Your son grows up, he gets older, he gets what mom did, what dad does. He comes to you and says, I want to go into the business. What does that conversation look like? Because a lot of kids follow in their parents' footsteps. Yep. Obviously, Ric Flair's daughter. I mean, I keep referencing him, but he's been on our show twice. So like, that's my frame.
He is one of my favorite humans of all time in and out the ring. And I love him, and I love Ashley. Charlotte is incredible. And I wish that I would have had a chance to face her, but maybe that time will come one day. I don't
Maybe.
know. But I just love, no, they absolutely are both deserving. And I think, she's one of the, especially as a female, you think about what incredible shoes that is to fill. Huge. And she has done a remarkable job of filling those shoes, and really not just filling those shoes, but making her own shoes. You know what I mean? And that is really the difference maker of it all, of like, I'm so proud of her. And, you see it all the time. And, even, with Natty and Tamina, and like second generation, third generation, or like that family tradition. I can't imagine, obviously, because it's not shoes that I've ever had to fulfill, but I just can't imagine the pressure that is you put on yourself, because we already keep ourselves at such high standards as it is. But then that's a whole nother level of pressure that I can't imagine living in. And it's just like, they've done such a remarkable job of really just, creating this whole space just for themselves, and really just standing into their own names, which is like the biggest struggle when doing that. So
of course.
Yeah. But my son, is this before or after he's gone to college?
I love how you frame that. Okay. That was very good deflect. I mean, that is the best I have seen anybody do. I think the answer lies right there. So college is obviously important. I'm very impressed that you are trained very well. And that wasn't even a setup or leading the witness. I'm just very curious, like, what if? So he's gone to college. He comes to you and says, I want to wrestle.
Well, even prior to college, honestly, like, I think that the biggest thing that you can do for your child is to, whatever their dream is to harness that, and do whatever you can to cultivate that dream. And whether that is to be an engineer, or to be, to work with the children, I don't care what it is. I just feel like we always speak these dreams as children, and it's only through life that they get cut off, or we feel like they're impossible for us. And as a parent, I want to be the first person to be able to lift that dream up, whatever it is. So if he was to come to me and say that's what he wanted to do, I would 1000%, help him in any way I can. And that would be to send him to the best school around, because I don't think that I would be able to teach him, because he's my son, and I would show favoritism, because he can go wrong in my eyes. So there is that. I don't know. I would just make sure that, I just think that you have to cultivate dreams. You really, really do.
Yeah. Because I think sometimes as parents, we want our children we obviously want the very best for them, no matter what. I know that is a fact. And we want to encourage them and their choices and that sort of thing. So of course we want our kids to follow on our footsteps, but they might have a completely different interest. I always am curious about that, because I wonder what that process would look like, or what it has looked like for some of these other amazing women and men who have second generation, third generation wrestlers, maybe even fourth, who have taken a swing at this. I love it. I love your music. And if you're ever in the Bay Area, we have to connect that way.
Yes.
MickieJames.com is where you can find everything out about you. You're on social media. Go to YouTube. If you've never watched any wrestling match in your entire life, you have to watch her in the ring, because she is just fantastic, and 6-time champion. And this is great, Mickie. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.
Well, no, thank you for having me. And I was going to say, well, if you're going to YouTube, make sure you go check out my GAW TV show with my sister SoCal Val and Lisa Marie as well. And I will say that make sure you go to nationalwrestlingalliance.com, so that way you can follow what we're doing leading into St. Louis for Empower and NWA 73 and all the exciting stuff there to come. And very exciting. Yeah, very excited.